Introduction to angles. An angle is made up of two rays that share a common endpoint called the vertex. An angle is created by rotating one ray away from a fixed ray. The fixed ray is called the initial side of the angle, and the rotated ray is called the terminal side of the angle. Now, angles can have positive, negative, or zero measure. Positive angles are formed by counterclockwise rotation. Negative angles by clockwise rotation. And angles of zero measure are formed when there is no rotation. As you can see in our examples below, in the first example, we rotated counterclockwise 60 degrees. So because it is counterclockwise, this is a positive 60 degrees. In the second example, we still have a 60-degree angle, but this time our rotation was clockwise. So that is a negative 60 degrees. Two common ways to measure angles are degrees and radians, and these have a very special relationship. If we think about a circle, there are 360 degrees in a circle, and there are 2 pi radians in a circle. So 360 degrees is equal to 2 pi radians. If we divide both sides of that equation by 2, we get that 180 degrees equals pi. And so that tells us that 1 degree is pi over 180 radians, and 1 radian is 180 over pi degrees. So this gives us a way to convert between radians and degrees. So if we're going to convert from degrees to radians, we want to multiply by pi over 180 and simplify the answer. To go from radians to degrees, we're going to multiply by 180 over pi and simplify the answer. Convert the following angles to radian measure. For example 1, consider 10 degrees. To convert this to radians, we're going to multiply 10 by pi over 180. That gives us 10 pi over 180, which reduces to pi over 18. So 10 degrees is pi over 18 radians. Example 2, negative 150 degrees. So we're going to follow a very similar procedure. We're going to multiply negative 150 by pi over 180. That gives us negative 150 pi over 180, which simplifies to negative 5 pi over 6. Now let's convert to degree measure, and let's use pi over 4 as our first example here. So to convert to degrees, we're going to multiply pi over 4 by 180 over pi. Note that my pi's will cancel, leaving me with 180 divided by 4, which is 45 degrees. The next example is negative 13 pi over 18. So we're going to multiply that by 180 over pi. Our pi's cancel, and note that 18 goes into 180 10 times. So we have negative 13 times 10, which is negative 130 degrees. Another important concept in this section is that of coterminal angles. Coterminal angles are angles in standard position that have the same terminal side. Now, an angle is in standard position if its initial side is along the positive x-axis. Coterminal angles can be found by adding or subtracting multiples of 360 or 2 pi. So let's consider our first example here. We have a 45-degree angle, and we're going to find some angles that are coterminal to that. So if we were to start on the positive x-axis and rotate around a full circle and then go up 45 degrees, then this gives us an angle of measure 405 degrees. That's 360 plus 45. Now, this angle started on the positive x-axis and it ends on the same ray as 45 degrees. So these two are coterminal. Now remember, we can also rotate clockwise. So in our last picture, we start on the positive x-axis and we rotate clockwise. And this gives us a negative 315 degree angle. But because it starts on the positive x-axis and has the same terminal side as 45 degrees and 405 degrees, all three of these angles are coterminal. Now technically, we could rotate counterclockwise or clockwise any number of times. So there are an infinite number of angles that are coterminal to 45 degrees. So we're going to focus on a specific angle, and that's the angle of least non-negative measure. So if we're looking for the angle of least non-negative measure, theta c, that is coterminal with a given angle, if that angle that we're given is positive, we're going to subtract 360, or 2 pi, until the new angle is between 0 and 360, or 0 and 2 pi. If the given angle is negative, we're going to add 360, or 2 pi, until the new angle is between 0 and 360, or if we're in radians, 0 and 2 pi. Find the angle of least non-negative measure, theta c, that is coterminal with the given angle. First, let's consider 845 degrees. Because this is positive, we're going to subtract 360 degrees to get a 485 degree angle. Now, this angle is coterminal to 845 degrees, but we want to know if it's the least non-negative angle that is coterminal to 845 degrees. So because I can subtract 360 again, I should. So 485 minus 360 gives me 125 degrees. Now, if I were to subtract 360 again, I would have a negative angle. So 125 is the least non-negative coterminal angle to 845. Consider the angle negative 253 degrees. Because it is negative, we're going to add 360 to get 107. Now, this is the angle of least non-negative measure. If we were to continue adding 360, we would find bigger and bigger coterminal angles, but 107 is the angle that we're looking for. Now let's look at some angles that are in radians. For example 3, consider 12 pi over 5. Because it is positive, and because it is in radians, we are going to subtract 2 pi. So 12 pi over 5 minus 2 pi means that we have to get a common denominator of 5. So we have 12 pi over 5 minus 10 pi over 5 to give us 2 pi over 5. So 2 pi over 5 is coterminal to 12 pi over 5, but is this the angle that we're looking for? So I ask myself, can I subtract again? Well, if I subtracted 10 pi over 5 from 2 pi over 5, I would get a negative angle. So 2 pi over 5 is the least non-negative coterminal angle to 12 pi over 5. Consider negative 171 pi over 60. Because I am in radians, and because the angle is negative, I will add 2 pi. So I must get a common denominator of 60. So negative 171 pi over 60 plus 120 pi over 60 is negative 51 pi over 60. And while this is a coterminal angle, it is still negative, so it is not the least non-negative angle. So I must add again. So negative 51 pi over 60 plus 120 pi over 60 is 69 pi over 60, which is the same thing as 23 pi over 20. So 23 pi over 20 is the least non-negative coterminal angle to negative 171 pi over 60.